Have you ever walked into a room and felt every single eye cut straight through you? Like they were waiting for you to fail? What if that moment happened on the biggest day of your life, your wedding day? Imagine this. You spent weeks creating a dress with your own hands, pouring every ounce of love and memory into it. And the very first thing you hear when you step in is your mother-in-law whispering, "She looks so cheap." My chest locked up, my cheeks burned, and I swear I almost turned back. But here's the thing. The same dress they laughed at was about to leave them completely silent. That moment still plays in my head like a movie, every sound sharper than it should have been. The chandelier above sparkled like it was mocking me. The glasses clinked too loudly. The whispers slid across the room like little daggers. My sister-in-law leaned closer to her cousin and said, not even bothering to hide it, "She couldn't rent something nicer? This is embarrassing." And suddenly I wasn't a bride anymore. I was a target. You know that feeling when the ground feels shaky under your heels? When your throat tightens and your palms start to sweat and all you want to do is disappear? That was me. Truth is, I wanted to cry, but I held my head up and forced myself to keep walking. Because that dress they mocked, it wasn't just a dress. It was my story. Let me tell you how it started. I didn't grow up in their kind of world. My husband's family lived in a mansion where the chandeliers were worth more than the house I grew up in. They cared about status, about names printed on labels, about how much you could flash when you entered a room. Me? I grew up in a small town where people borrowed sugar from neighbors, where my mom worked overnight nursing shifts, and my dad fixed cars in a garage that smelled like oil and dust. We weren't rich, but we knew how to make things last. My grandma taught me to sew before I learned how to drive. I'd sit at the kitchen table while she guided my little hands, saying, "If you can't buy it, make it. If you can't make it yours." That stuck with me. So when it came time for my wedding, I didn't even think about stepping into a shiny boutique with $1,000 price tags. I wanted something that was mine, something with soul. So I walked right past the luxury stores and straight into Mrs. Caldwell's little shop on Main Street. You'd miss it if you weren't looking. Tiny sign, faded gold paint that read, "Alterations and Repairs," bell on the door that jingled off key. Inside smelled like fabric, old coffee, and lavender sachets tucked in drawers. Bolts of cloth towered higher than me. Mrs. Caldwell was in her 70s, silver hair pulled back, glasses slipping down her nose, hands calloused from decades of stitching life into clothes. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses and said, "Well, sweetheart, what are we making?" And that's when I knew I was in the right place. We chose a soft ivory fabric, simple, timeless, not screaming for attention but whispering elegance. I remember smoothing my palm across it and feeling this strange calm. It wasn't expensive, but it felt alive. Every night after work, still smelling like coffee from my shift at the cafe, I'd stop by her shop. We'd pin, cut, sew. She hummed old songs from the 50s while I stitched beads onto the bodice. Sometimes she told me stories about her late husband. Sometimes we just sat in silence, the hum of the sewing machine filling the air. And every detail stitched into that dress carried a piece of me. When I finally tried it on, standing in front of her crooked mirror with chipped wood at the corners, I cried. Not because I felt like a princess, but because I felt like myself. "Not gonna lie," I whispered to my reflection. "This is it. That dress was me. My history, my pride, my love." And that's exactly why their words cut so deep. They didn't see the work, the care, the meaning. They saw a missing label. To them, no designer name meant no value. And in their world, that made me cheap. My husband told me not to worry. He kissed my forehead and said, "They'll come around. Don't let them get to you." But he didn't grow up with their eyes on me, judging me, dissecting me. He didn't feel the whispers the way I did. I knew better. I knew the moment I walked in, wearing my own creation, they'd see weakness. But what they didn't know was that weakness was about to become the thing that changed everything. The first time I stepped into their mansion, I knew I didn't belong. You ever walk into a place so polished, it feels like even your shoes are apologizing for being too plain? That was me, standing on marble floors so shiny I could see my reflection, under chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a museum, not a living room. The air smelled like perfume and expensive candles, like money had its own scent. His mom swept in, heels clicking, diamonds flashing, and the way she looked at me, it wasn't cruel yet, but it wasn't kind either. It was the look of someone measuring me and already deciding I came up short. Dinner that night was like stepping into another world. The table stretched longer than my childhood street. Every plate matched, every glass sparkled, and servants, yes, actual servants, poured wine that cost more than my entire paycheck. I wore a navy dress, simple, neat. I thought it was fine, but the second I sat down, I saw the sideways glances. His sister leaned over to her husband and whispered, "She didn't even try." He chuckled, not even bothering to hide it. My mother-in-law lifted her glass, her diamond bracelet catching the light, and said, "In this family, presentation is everything." And she smiled right at me. My fork froze mid-air. Presentation. That word lingered like a curse. I nodded politely, cheeks burning, telling myself not to cry. I laughed along at their jokes, even though half of them were about people too poor to care about appearances. They didn't say my name, but I felt it. Every dig was a knife sliding closer. From that day on, I knew what they thought of me. Not one of them ever asked about my life, my family, my dreams. They only asked about brands, about labels, about what I could wear or show off that would prove I belonged. And every time I couldn't answer, I sank a little deeper into that outsider seat. So when the wedding planning started, I should have known. I should have known they'd expect me to parade in some designer gown, price tag bigger than a car payment, as if love could be measured in receipts. They made little comments, his aunt casually asking, "So, which designer are you going with?" His cousin joking, "Don't tell me you're going DIY." And I just smiled, tight-lipped, because if I told them the truth, they'd laugh in my face. And maybe that's why, deep down, I didn't tell them. I wanted the reveal to be mine. I wanted to walk in my own creation, and dare them to sneer. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't terrified. The night before the wedding, I sat alone with that dress hanging on the back of the door. The ivory fabric glowed in the soft lamplight, every bead catching shadows. I traced the stitches with my fingertips, remembering every late night at Mrs. Caldwell's shop, every laugh we shared over spilled coffee, every hum of the machine as we brought it to life. And yet all I could hear in my head were their voices, cheap, embarrassing, not good enough. My stomach churned, my hands shook. What if they were right? What if my husband regretted me the second he saw me standing next to him? I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, staring out at the city lights, whispering to myself, "You're enough. This is you. You're enough." And when the morning came, I slipped into that gown with trembling hands but steady heart. My husband's eyes lit up when he saw me, and for a moment I believed love could drown out every cruel word. But love can't stop whispers. Love can't stop laughter. And the second I walked into that room, into their world, I knew the storm was waiting. My mother-in-law's voice cut through the chatter. My sister-in-law's giggle joined in, and the rest followed like vultures circling. I clenched my jaw, lifted my chin, and reminded myself of every stitch, every bead, every hour of work that went into this dress. I wasn't just wearing fabric. I was wearing proof of who I was, where I came from, what I stood for. And still, their words dug in deep. They wanted me to feel small, to crumble under the weight of their judgment. But what they didn't know was that someone else in that very room was about to see what they couldn't. Someone whose opinion would change everything. The room smelled like roses and champagne, like wealth bottled up and poured across every corner. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light over polished floors. A string quartet played in the background, and laughter bubbled like it belonged more to a stage than to a family gathering. I stepped further in, my heels clicking softly, the ivory fabric of my dress catching the light. For one brief second I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd see it the way I did. But the whispers started again, louder this time, spreading like wildfire. His cousin nudged another guest, smirking. "I told you she'd wear something cheap." A few guests laughed, eyes darting to me, waiting for my reaction. My stomach twisted, my throat tight. You know that moment when your ears ring so loud you can barely hear anything else? That's how it felt, like the entire world had turned into a stage and I was the joke. I gripped the fabric at my side, nails digging into the seams I had sewn with my own hands, and I forced myself to keep walking. My husband was at the far end, his eyes soft, smiling, oblivious to the storm swirling around me. I wanted to run to him, hide behind his calm, but something inside me snapped. I couldn't hide. Not anymore. My mother-in-law's voice cut through the air, sharp enough to silence a violin note mid-string. We expected a daughter-in-law, not a tailor. She let the word hang there, dripping with disdain. Guests chuckled, some hid their smiles behind their glasses. My cheeks burned, my heart pounded against my ribs. For a second, I thought I might break, thought the tears pressing behind my eyes would betray me. But I stood still. I inhaled. I let the silence stretch longer than it should have. And in that silence I realized something. They were waiting. Waiting for me to crumble, waiting for me to confirm their worst assumptions. I lifted my chin, letting the chandelier light hit my face, letting them see I wasn't ashamed. Not gonna lie, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting to fall. My sister-in-law leaned closer to her friend, whispering loud enough for everyone to catch. If I were her, I'd hide in the bathroom. They laughed. My fingers itched to grab a glass of water and throw it, to scream, to storm out. But I didn't. Instead, I let the quiet settle. People shifted uncomfortably, their laughter dying down when I didn't flinch. And then, something I didn't expect happened. A man at the corner of the room, someone I hadn't noticed before, stepped forward. Tall, dressed in a sharp suit, his eyes fixed on me. Not mocking, not amused, but curious. He walked slowly, weaving past the guests, ignoring the whispers. When he reached me, he glanced down at the bodice of my dress, then back up at my face, and said with a voice that carried across the room, "Who designed this?" The room froze. Every laugh died. Every eye turned. My lips parted, my throat dry, but I forced the words out, steady and proud. I did. Gasps rippled like a wave. His eyebrows lifted, a small smile tugging at his lips, and he said, "Remarkable." Suddenly the whispers shifted, no longer cruel, but stunned. My mother-in-law's glass slipped slightly in her hand. My sister-in-law's smirk vanished. People began murmuring, not about cheap, but about elegant, unique, stunning. And in that moment, I realized the tide was turning. But what I didn't know yet was who that man really was. And the truth? His next words would change everything. The room held its breath, like every chandelier crystal and every flower arrangement leaned in to listen. That man's eyes stayed locked on me, sharp but not cruel, curious in a way that made me straighten my shoulders. "You did this?" he asked again, louder this time, as if daring anyone to laugh. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice not to shake, and answered, "Yes, I designed it. I sewed it. Every detail is mine." A hush fell so deep you could hear the violinist stop mid-song. My mother-in-law's lips pressed into a thin line, her knuckles white around the stem of her glass. My sister-in-law glanced at her, waiting for a cue to sneer, but no one moved. And then the man leaned closer, touched the edge of the fabric near my sleeve with just 2 fingers, and nodded slowly. "This," he said, voice carrying, "is couture with soul." Murmurs rippled through the guests, this time not mocking but admiring. Words floated through the air, elegant, stunning, unique. The same mouths that had laughed minutes before now whispered differently. My cheeks flushed, not with shame this time, but with something new, power. I blinked, trying to process what was happening, and then my husband appeared at my side, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Is everything okay?" he whispered. I gave a small nod, my eyes still on the stranger. My husband turned to him and asked, "Sorry, have we met?" The man smiled faintly. "I don't believe so." "Name's Jonathan Hale." Gasps fluttered again, like his name meant something. My stomach flipped. I looked around and realized half the room recognized him. My cousin-in-law whispered under her breath, "He's the creative director at Hale & Sons. They do half the gowns in New York." Suddenly it clicked. Jonathan Hale wasn't just a guest. He was the guest, a man whose approval could make or break careers. My mother-in-law's face went pale, her earlier smugness draining like spilled wine. Jonathan's eyes returned to me. "This design, it's extraordinary. Clean lines, thoughtful details, perfect balance of tradition and individuality. Who taught you?" My throat tightened, but I managed a small smile. "My grandmother taught me to sew. A local seamstress helped me finish it. But the design, that's all mine." He tilted his head, studying me like I was something rare. Then he pulled a small card from his jacket pocket, held it between two fingers, and extended it toward me. "Call me. I want to talk about opportunities." The card gleamed under the chandelier light, his name embossed in gold. My hands trembled as I took it, my pulse hammering in my ears. Gasps echoed again, this time sharper, stunned. Around us, guests leaned closer, whispering fast, some clapping softly, some nodding in approval. The shift was electric. In minutes, I'd gone from cheap to the center of the room, from mocked to admired. My husband squeezed my hand, pride flashing in his eyes. But behind him, I saw my mother-in-law's face tighten, her jaw clenching so hard it looked painful. She wasn't proud. She was furious. My sister-in-law's mouth hung open, her planned insult dying on her tongue. The same family that laughed at me minutes ago now scrambled to adjust their expressions, pretending they hadn't joined in. My mother-in-law finally forced a smile, brittle and sharp. "Well," she said, voice a little too loud, "I suppose talent can come from the most unexpected places." It was meant as a dig, but it fell flat. Nobody laughed. Not this time. Instead, Jonathan Hale turned to her and replied, calm but pointed, "Sometimes the most extraordinary talent comes from the places you dismiss." Her cheeks reddened and she looked away. I stood taller, my heartbeat steady now, my shame replaced with something stronger. For the first time, I wasn't the outsider in the room. They were. And yet, deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Because when families like theirs lose control, they don't accept it quietly. They fight back. And what happened next proved just how far they were willing to go. The moment Jonathan Hale slipped that card into my hand, I felt the entire room shift. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It was respect. The kind of respect money couldn't buy. The kind that comes from someone powerful acknowledging you. And suddenly, every guest who had smirked at me before now wanted to be the first to shake my hand, to compliment my dress, to pretend they had seen my talent all along. My mother-in-law's smile was stretched thin, her knuckles white around her glass, but she forced herself to murmur, "Well, maybe I underestimated you." My sister-in-law laughed nervously and said, "Oh, I always knew you had style." Lies, of course, but I let them talk. For once, their words didn't sting. I stood taller, my husband's hand warm in mine, and I realized I wasn't the one being tested anymore. They were. Because now everyone saw them for what they were. Shallow, petty, cruel. And the more they tried to cover it up, the clearer it became. As the night went on, people approached me with genuine curiosity. A guest asked if I took commissions. Another wondered if I had ever thought about starting a line. My heart raced at the thought. Me, the girl who grew up in a small town, being asked if I'd design gowns for New York society? It felt unreal. And yet there I was, living it. My husband beamed, proud in a way I hadn't seen before, squeezing my hand like he was silently saying, "See? I told you they'd come around." But what he didn't see was the fury simmering in his mother's eyes. Later that night, when the music softened and most of the guests had left, she pulled me aside. Her voice was sharp, quiet, venomous. "Don't let this go to your head. You embarrassed this family tonight, parading around like some working girl trying to prove a point. You may have impressed Jonathan Hale, but to us, you'll always be cheap." Her words stung, but not in the way she wanted. I actually smiled. For the first time, her insult didn't land. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "This dress wasn't cheap. It was priceless, because it's mine, and you don't get to define me anymore." She blinked, stunned, like no one had ever dared talk back to her. Then she turned on her heel and stormed away, her heels clicking angrily against the marble. My sister-in-law followed, glaring over her shoulder. I should have been shaken, but instead I felt lighter. Free. Because I realized something in that moment. I had been trying so hard to fit into their world, to win their approval, when the truth was, I never needed it. Their approval meant nothing compared to the pride I felt standing in my own skin, in my own creation. The rest of the night blurred into laughter, music, and quiet congratulations from people who mattered. Jonathan Hale caught me before he left, leaned down and said, "Don't waste this. Call me." His words echoed in my chest like a promise. And for the first time in a long time, I believed I had a future that wasn't chained to their judgment. Weeks later, I sat in a cafe with Jonathan, portfolio in hand, showing him sketches I had hidden away for years. He listened, nodded, and said, "You have something special. Let's make it happen." That one moment, the night my husband's family tried to humiliate me, became the doorway to everything I'd ever dreamed of. Their laughter had pushed me into the light, and they didn't even realize it. Now, whenever I wear that dress, not as a bride but as a reminder, I smile, because it isn't just fabric. It's proof that sometimes what people mock is the very thing that will silence them forever. And here's the afterhook, the part that still makes me shiver when I think about it. Every time my mother-in-law sees my designs in magazines, on women she could only dream of befriending, she remembers the night she called me cheap, and realizes she was the cheapest one in the room.